Welcome to Autistic People Talking, a podcast where autistic people talk. Welcome, everyone. My name is Claire, and this is my channel, Woodshed Theory. Here, I make content about what it is like to live as an adult on the autism spectrum and whatever else feels good to me. So if that sounds good to you, or if you're feeling particularly gracious today, and I hope that you are, please go ahead and click the subscribe button, ring the bell. I almost forgot to mention that I put out videos a few times a week, so click the like and the share. Everyone, I am very excited today. Welcome to my podcast, Autistic People Talking, a podcast where autistic people talk. And today we have a very special guest, Sam of Yosemite Sam. Welcome, Sam.
Hello. Do I have to do a singing intro too, or am I allowed to not?
I mean, it's really up to you.
Now you put me on the spot. I'm too scared to. No, there isn't really a good Yosemite Sam jingle that I have, up my sleeve. So maybe that would be a great competition.
Yeah, I think
someone could do that.
for me, a great jingle has a few things involved. It should be a little off, as in it can't sound that great. Because it should have like something in it where somebody's like, that doesn't sound quite right, and then it gets stuck in your head, and then you'll sing it forever.
So it needs to have something that you hate a little bit in it. Yes.
Yeah. People, mine kind of developed naturally as a way to get myself rolling in videos. Sometimes, like, I feel like when it's a cold open, I just don't know what to say, so I just like ease into it with a song. Sam, I'm so happy that you're here. I know a lot of people who are listening requested to have you on the podcast, and I'd love to hear from you a little bit about yourself. And why don't you tell us, why do you think you're here?
Why do I think I'm here? Well, it's funny. A lot of people on my end requested that I get you on my podcast as well. They were like, you should collab with her. And I'm like, oh, okay. So wait, that's a very interview-like question. Why do you think you're here? What can you bring to this podcast that why do I think I'm here? Can you reword that question in an accessible, friendly way?
Yeah, it's actually just a joke. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about why you're here and your background, tell us a little bit about your experience as a person who is diagnosed as on the autism spectrum, and what you do online, and yeah, get it rolling that way.
So I think before I start talking, we should probably say it's 8 o'clock at night for me, and like nothing good really happens for me after 8 o'clock, right?
Okay, cool.
Which is why I'm actually in my pajamas already. So I suppose I can give myself a story of Sam, which is that approximately, this is where I'm looking to check the date. How many years? Approximately 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with autism. And I haven't shut up about it since, some might say. No, I really wanted to make a YouTube channel for a very long time, and I didn't know what my thing would be other than just, sitting and talking about random things. And then when I got this diagnosis, I was like, oh, well, that's something that I can talk about. I know a lot about, and I kind of wanted to process the diagnosis at first. And so everything kind of spiraled from there, really.
Yeah.
My goal was really, I thought it would be cool to have a YouTube channel, earn a bit of extra money on the side. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and I was like, oh, I didn't really have much of a professional background in editing at the time. And so I was like, I really just wanted to earn some money of my own and feel a little better about myself, I suppose. And so the channel kind of took off from there. I think probably timing was a good portion of the luck that I had. The last 5 years, we've really seen a huge growth in the number of women and girls being diagnosed. This idea of like, oh, by the way, girls can be autistic too, has kind of shot up. Although I don't necessarily subscribe to that kind of binary view, I don't think autism really has a gender flavor of gender. um, we're seeing a lot of people who are not like the stereotypical autistic person start to be diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been very kind of exciting for me to be a part of that, a small part of it.
So what made you decide to you said you wanted to start making videos. At the time when you started, there wasn't really that many other people making videos talking about their experience with late diagnosis. So why did you at the time think this is a good idea? That's not even that's not how I wanted to ask that. Ah,
Why
I'm
did
gonna
I
leave
think
it in
that
because
this
it
was a
sounds
good
wrong.
idea?
Why did you think it was a good idea to start it? That's oh
Yeah.
my gosh, how embarrassing. Okay, what I meant was, uh, because you were this is kind of an original thing, there wasn't that many people you were following. So why was it a YouTube channel and not something else?
Um, well, I'd spent like a year and a half being really hyper focused on YouTube.
Mm,
So I actually kind of the YouTube stuff came first. I had a baby at that time, and like I'd basically spent a year and a half on the sofa, hyper focusing on watching videos on like how to best and most efficiently grow your YouTube channel and like
cool.
learning all of this stuff. So I just kind of got into this I got into this place where that was very interesting for me for a very long time. Um, and so I felt like I had like I was like this is something that I could do.
Hmm.
What was your question again? Why YouTube? Why not something else? I just thought it would be fun. And to
Yeah.
be honest, YouTube is still really the only social platform that pays creators even remotely enough to kind of like sustain, I think.
Mm-hmm.
um Not saying that like I still get paid way less than a minimum wage like just for my YouTube stuff alone. So you really do have to have either a lot of views or you need to be you know doing something in a certain niche. So
Right.
like if I had a business or finance channel, the you could make a lot more money off ads and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
So but yeah, it just seemed to make sense that like somebody will pay you to put videos on the internet and then you could sit and just make money in your sleep. That seemed like pretty sweet to me. It's a nice
Agreed.
setup. So that was kind of like it was the social media platform that allowed me to do that. And also
Hmm.
I'm not really good at the short form stuff that's become very trendy. Like I like
Yeah.
to be what's the word, like verbose, or I just like to be in depth. And even though my videos aren't even long by some YouTuber standards, um I like that process of creating something that
Yeah.
is informative and educational and entertaining and has that combination that actually makes people watch, but is also going to help somebody. Whether that's because they go, oh, I can. This is great. I can show this to my mom because I can't explain this, but this person can.
Mm, yeah.
And so that kind of started out like that way. And then to be honest, that's really still the focus that I have on YouTube is like really what I want to do. I want to provide value, as much value as I can, because I say I'm not really very good at dancing. I am very good at dancing and I can sing. I just don't like to do that sort of thing on social media. So I'm not really, I'll do some short form sometimes, but YouTube's where I'm comfortable. It's well within my comfort zone.
Yeah, I find that when on social media, like the performance aspect um can be a little bit difficult because it's like sometimes you just want to share information and you don't want to do the song and dance with the coming up with a 15-second clip of something that people are going to stop and watch, I think is really a lot of pressure. So, and then
Yeah,
you
and
don't know if anyone will watch it. So,
yeah, I know the struggle. But yeah, I mean, those two things are also, I think, quite different skills. So the skill of having like being able to, yeah, say what you need to say in 15 seconds and make people stop and listen is
I don't
really
have that.
different from the skill of like, yeah, exactly, being able to talk in depth, which maybe that's more of an autistic thing. But I see a lot of autistic content creators doing short form stuff and they seem to do all right, but it's just not my thing.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of like being forced to distill one's message. Sometimes it's surprising. sometimes I surprise myself, I guess, like with how succinct I can be, because if it's like a natural form of conversation, I could just go on and on forever, and I want to like share every single detail. Even when I was at a stage like writing research papers in my life, like I would over research things. I wanted to have
Mm,
like as many sources cited as possible. So I totally get that, where I just want to give all of the information and give it correctly. Uh it's interesting to me too, like when you sit down to make a video, how how fast the time racks up, because you're like, oh, I just have a few things to say.
yeah.
And then by the time you're
18
finished,
pages later, yes.
how about your experience as a person on the spectrum, kind of starting your journey on the internet? Like, how has that been your experience kind of stepping into the online autism community and working in that community? What has that been like for you?
I would say when it started out, it was fun. And I think as my platform has grown, it's become more challenging. When you have like a small platform and like nobody really cares that much if you say something really stupid or whatever,
I
and you
get
can
it.
kind of
Yeah,
just be like chill in the comments and like, so it's fun and it's definitely like of its time. But then, as you begin to grow, you can't keep that up because
mm,
it's insane. You just simply can't. And so that was when, I think inevitably you start to feel more isolated from your audience, right? And you
mm,
start to feel a little bit more like a performing something,
mm,
like you're making content for people, but then everyone's got something to say about your background or your lighting. Like everyone's got these little comments, and that can be really hard to deal with as an autistic person. But also, like, this feeling like you're just constantly being criticized because actually you are, because people write whatever on the internet.
yeah,
And so, as somebody who's repeatedly tried throughout my life to, toughen up, grow a thicker skin, right? That doesn't work. So
mm,
you have to find different strategies to make yourself okay with everything, you
yeah,
know?
for sure.
Um, and my well, what I mean, so for example, one of my best performing videos, I actually shot and I wrote it and I shot it and I did it very quickly. And like I record everything in this room. You probably can't see, like, this is not a big room. Okay, so on this side is where I have like the sparkle curtain, and then I have to put my camera right here. There isn't a lot of space, right? So
Hmm.
everything is tight. And I have this ring light, right? And so I'm adjusting this, and then the camera's wrong, so I'm adjusting that, making sure the shot's right. You know. And then I stand up and I just adjust the camera a little bit, and so I sit down, and like the ring lights are in my glasses the whole time.
Yeah.
This video was like a year and a half ago, and every single day I log into my studio and I see someone being like, the ring lights are really distracting. Is it just me? And I'm like, no, if you would look at the thousands of comments talking about the ring light. But it just, like, every time I'm like, why do you need to mention that? Like, it's clear that I've obviously made a mistake somewhere. Like, I adjusted it and I sat down and then it was wrong, right? But it's just one of those things that it's kind of like annoys me. But then I also think, okay, well, would this video have done so well if I didn't have thousands of people commenting on this, like, engagement, right? So for me, it's
So
been about trying to
interesting that
find ways to cope, right?
it's
To
always
cope with
that
this
little
madness.
thing that you just don't even, you wouldn't think about, or it doesn't cross your mind. And then everyone picks up on it for the rest of time. So I get that for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And it also, what's interesting to me is time doesn't always equal, like the time that you put in, it doesn't always equal like the success of what your output
no,
is.
no,
So
no.
you could have an idea in the morning, and by the afternoon have a video out. And that
Yeah,
video does, and you're like, okay, well, throw away, not that great. And that video does way better. And actually what's interesting to me is that people, when things like that happen, people reach out. They're like, wow, that is the best thing you've ever done. And you're like,
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
one,
yeah.
not the one I spent several weeks thinking about and putting
I
together.
know, it's always the way though. But that's also one thing that I think is important to think about, even with an audience of autistic people. People like simple things for the
Mm,
large part, and so that some of my videos that I've done the best have been like pretty simple. Like, here's 5 things about this, or here's a list of this. You know, it's not me going into in depth on this, although some of those videos do well. But like, even autistic people like have this sort of short attention span.
yeah.
Um, like in the modern day. So it's just about, for me, it's like I know the videos that will do well, and I could make every single one of my videos be that like clickbaity, I don't know, like BuzzFeed style headlined type thing. But 5 years on, like I'm tired of
Tired,
like
yeah.
it takes sustaining content creation on the same topic over the course of years is tiring. And I'm not saying I run out of ideas. I've still got plenty of ideas, but it's like, do I want to make it? I could make another video on like signs of autism in adults. That will probably do quite well, but I don't want to. Now I'm having a bit of an internal battle, right? Because I'm just like, because that's boring for me.
Did you try
So
Googling 5 ways to come up with more video ideas?
no, it's all that Chat GPT, man. Chat GPT's got literally the worst video ideas, but it thinks it's really amazing. So I, give it lots of encouragement, which probably doesn't help.
I mean, at least it will be have flowery wording.
Yeah,
That's
very
every time I've
flowery.
tried anything on ChatGPT, I'm like, could you just calm it down with the adjectives? Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have to say, I do sometimes use ChatGPT. One thing it's very useful for is like outlining the video, right? So I say, hey,
Yeah.
I want to make a video on this topic. Can you give me some headings, like just to stop that blank page syndrome, right? Of like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm going to write. Like, give me this. And other times I've used it is if I'm doing a video that requires a little bit of like research into an area, and I think I don't really want to be spending time researching all of this. So I use it as a like, can you summarize this concept, right, in a way
Mm-hmm.
that's easy to understand, and then I can say, okay, this is a helpful way of describing it to an audience at whatever
Yeah, it's
level.
definitely one of those things where it has to be supplemental as opposed to like first line of defense. Like I think the thing that gets scary for me is when people are like too trusting of it, right? So if you put in
Mm,
like, give me this information on an autism topic, and then if somebody just blindly put out video content on that without checking sources or like that to me is where it would become
yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean that's just opening up an entire conversation about AI, but that's where it becomes to me a little bit dangerous because as not that I'm putting myself on your level, but as people who talk about it, who talk about something that's so important publicly, we have to be really careful about the information that we share with people.
Yeah.
Even when you were saying before, as your channel gets bigger, when you're a smaller channel, you don't have to worry as much. If you make a mistake or say something, you can fix it. But the
Yeah.
larger the audience becomes, the harder it is to uh, maintain that kind of level of control.
Hmm.
So you have to
And
be really
also
careful.
of like the sort of making sure that you are actually giving really accurate information so that people don't get misled, or I don't know,
Exactly.
call you out's not the worst thing that really could happen, but like it's pretty exhausting having to produce content at such a high standard just so you don't like accidentally offend someone, or like everything has to be checked. It's a lot to put on people to expect people to like make it regular content, and also never say anything problematic and never say anything bad by accident, and like just be this exemplary human being. At least this is just, I think this is the pressure that I've internalized. This isn't
Right.
actually necessarily like what people have said directly to me, but it's definitely like the vibe of the internet is very hypercritical towards people,
Especially when
you know?
it's autistic people. If you're an autistic person making content, you al- already have communication issues, right? So to then say, okay, I'm never going to have a communication mistake. I'm never going to
Mm-hmm.
get it wrong. It's just impossible. And that
Yeah.
that I think there's a lot of pressure there to get it correct. That's why like my constant message, my constant like stand up and preach is to give each other more grace
Yeah.
and more kindness because no matter who you talk to, whether it be about autism or something else, you're gonna run into people who say incorrect things, and it's not necessarily that they're saying it because they're trying to say the wrong thing, or they're trying to, uh, be critical or mean or whatever. Many times, the people who say the wrong things are trying their hardest in that moment to say the right thing.
Yeah.
They get it wrong.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's for me, it's like then my responsibility to take a step back and say, like, instead of this being a moment where we all get upset, like, let's make it a teachable moment and then we
Yeah.
move forward together.
It's so funny you mentioned that because that kind of reminds me of when my mum is trying to be politically correct about something, and she tries so hard that she actually ends up saying something more offensive than what she was going to say in the first. And I'm like, yeah, you know, then it's just a question of like, what does a teachable moment look like
Yeah.
when you're, a creator?
Mm,
And this isn't something that I've experienced of like having people kind of pile on, but it is something that like, yeah, I would say that I'm pretty concerned about because, hey, guess what? Like, I'm autistic too and ADHD. Yes, I may have a degree of rejection sensitivity. So get everybody getting at me on Twitter. That's not going to help me really.
mm,
But it's obviously the nature of like when you start to get numbers of people, one helpful comment is helpful. 10,000 helpful comments feel like everybody hates you, you know.
that's true.
And I suppose I think that's probably true for any creator, um, which is probably why so many creators don't maybe don't do accountability very well because it's a very unnatural position to be in, having so many people coming at you all
Yeah.
at once.
Yeah, the
You know,
feedback is hard.
yeah.
I It took me a long time to get to a point where and I know I've talked about this before. Um, as an autistic person, I wasn't expecting so much feedback, being on the internet, other than I thought that maybe there would be a lot of hate, which
Yeah.
wasn't as big of an issue as I had anticipated. The thing that I, um, struggled with and still, like, it's a lot better now, but, the thing I struggle with was, like, feeling like I needed to take every single piece of feedback and take it on
Yeah.
and, like, really let that sit with me and, like, really consider if every single piece of feedback that I was getting was, um, like, "Are they right?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's so it can become very unhealthy, you know, just because somebody watched 30 seconds of you and comments like, "I know that you're not autistic." I don't need to be, like, losing sleep over it, you know? But in the beginning, it was like that, like, "How could they say that? They don't know me. Are they right?
Yeah.
What does it mean? What does everyone else think that?" Yeah, it takes a while to kind of say, like, I don't have to take everything that people talk to me about on.
Yeah. And like also I think you can just say like you don't need to take anything that people say. Even if you made a mistake, like why do you have to get feedback on every mistake you make? Not everybody does, you
That's
know?
true. Well, I'd love to hear, a little bit more for people who may not know as much about your background. Could you tell us a little bit about, your experience, with diagnosis? Like, how did you come to be diagnosed? Were you a late diagnosed person? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, sure. So I was late diagnosed. I was diagnosed just over 5 years ago, just before I started my channel. And like many people, like many late diagnosed women in their 30s, having children was kind of like a big point. It's a very common point that autistic women are diagnosed
Mm,
because, we typically have a whole bunch of coping strategies, and all of these things work fine until you throw a baby into the mix who does not give a shit about your coping strategies, by the way.
right.
Um, and so, my first child, I'm trying to actually remember. My first child, my son, He was actually all right as a baby. He didn't sleep a lot, and so the sleep deprivation was definitely something that was very, very hard for me to deal with. And so during that time, during pregnancy, pregnancy was hard as well, and during that time postpartum with my first child, um, I think I probably experienced what I could now identify as like a bit of an autistic burnout,
Mm,
although I wasn't working at the time, so it didn't necessarily show up in the same way because you're hanging around the house with your baby, you don't really need to get out of your pajamas, like, so it's not really obvious that that's what it is, but I think looking back that's probably what it was. And I did experience some, I would say, loss of skills during that
mm,
time,
mm.
mainly social skills. The masking stuff, that was really the stuff that kind of started crumbling at that point, realizing like, oh, I actually never got past the fake it till you make it bit, because
Right?
that was as a teenager, that was my mantra. Like, I was trying to teach myself social skills, right, by myself in my bedroom, you know. And so fake it till you make it was like, okay, when I got to 18, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna mask, right, like, let's fake it. And it occurred to me, in my early 30s, I was just like, it never got any easier. I never, like, I never had to stop masking it. And so um around that time I was watching a lot of YouTube. Like I said, I was really into YouTube and this whole idea, and then eventually, the algorithm did push me some content that was about autism in girls, and I didn't watch it for a very long time. It just kept on pushing this video, and eventually I watched it and I was like, oh shit, this is my life. What do I do now?
YouTube knew
um
before Sam knew.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I suspect because the previous year my husband was diagnosed with ADHD, and so I was
Mm,
watching a lot of content from How to ADHD, and Jessica's channel was actually one of the big inspirations between wanting to start a channel. I was like, I could do that for autism. So it was very
right.
much like I was very inspired by Jessica's channel. I think it's great, and so I was like, yeah, I could. There's no autistic version of this
Hmm.
necessarily. So the algorithm knew who I was. And then I have an educational background in psychology. I did psychology for my degree. And so I kind of put that all together. And then I did understand about autism, but it was very much from this perspective. And then sort of adding this new information of like, oh, yeah, autism actually can look like this. And that is actual autism. It's not just like fake autism or something. Um, uh, then I was like, oh, this all makes sense now. I have to tell everybody about it. So that was basically how the YouTube channel got started. Um,
Yeah,
and
and I remember, gosh, I'm about,
when did you
oh,
start your channel?
well, the channel, maybe it was 3 in March,
Ah,
and then for about, I think it was about 9 months or so that I got diagnosed before I started the channel. And then obviously there was the period before that of like doing some research. I actually stopped researching after I realized that I was probably on the autism spectrum. I got nervous that maybe I would like, I don't know how to say it, like self-actualizing, like would I like go too far down the rabbit hole and then like talk myself into like something that
that's
wasn't
very common,
real? Yeah, like
Like,
I
I was sitting there in my assessment being like, what if I'm faking this? Like, where do
yes.
these things, like, what if I'm pretending all of this information about my life and I'm faking this so that she'll give me a diagnosis? And I'm like, first of all, where does that come from? Where does this idea come from that all of these experiences inside our heads are like somehow just for attention? I'm like, no, no, they're not. It's just what my life is like, you know.
Man, I could soapbox forever about this I'm not on TikTok or anything, but these ideas of that uh people are out there trying to like get autism diagnoses because they're trying to be like cool and different and like that I every like the women that are more my age that I talk to, well, basically anyone, men too, non-binary, I like anybody that I talk to, it's like the same thing where it's like that is not the case at all when I was exploring, especially a late diagnosed. a late diagnosis, you're not thinking like, "Oh, it would be so cool if I could be on the autism spectrum." Like,
Yeah,
it
because
would
that's
be
where all the cool
so
kids hang out, isn't it? On
yeah,
the
like,
spectrum.
I finally get my, like, once I'm a card-carrying member, I'll finally be like, everyone will think I'm so
Well, you'll
neat.
get loads of free money and free stuff, and everyone will love you, and you'll have loads of friends, and like that's reality, isn't it? That's the life of an autistic person.
Yeah, I mean, my diagnosis even was, I was seeing the doctor via video chat. So
Oh
it was
yeah.
like it was literally like, "Okay, well, it's autism." And I was like, "What now?" And they were like, "Well, keep working on that OCD stuff that you're working on, and then the phone call ends and then it's done." It's like then you're left alone. There's like not it's
Yeah.
not like there's like a big um there's not like a big balloon drop and people come in and like bring you a cake and
There
uh
should be though. I keep saying this on podcast interviews and stuff like that. There should be like an autism cake. I feel like I've seen it online.
yeah, the
Congrats
it's
on your
autism,
autism.
like congrats, it's autism. I
Yeah.
wish I had a cake. I didn't get a cake. I didn't have it. There wasn't any special part. I was more like I felt relieved that they said yes and that I wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
But then just like everyone else, there's always the imposter syndrome of like, well, what if I exactly what you were saying, like, you're sitting in the diagnosis and you're sitting in these meetings and that you're answering questions and you're like, "Well, am I being my total self? Am I just
Hmm.
giving answers so that like, am I leading them to a diagnosis? I don't want to do that."
Yeah.
But then I think it comes down to a lot of, like, questioning, always being made to feel like you have to question your own feelings.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we grew up, right?
Yeah.
That our internal experience was never believed. So why would it be believed now? You know?
Very confusing
Yeah.
to, like, try and pull that out of someone, which is probably why it's so difficult to diagnose people anyway. Um, I'm not I'm not a professional, and I won't ever claim to be, and I don't envy, um, diagnosticians because I think it's interesting because I think it's pretty difficult to diagnose someone, to know what you're looking for, but then I also feel like once you know what you're looking for, it can't is it that hard? Like
Well, I always think it's like pattern recognition. It's
right.
really not about like going through the diagnostic checklist. Like, and I really have to hold back on this because I'm starting, like, God, now I've been obsessed with autism for like so long that I'm starting to get a little too good at recognizing it in people. So I
Mm,
do have to like shut my mouth when it's like, I mean, I see some friends and their kids being autistic and they're like, oh, your kid gets on so well with mine. I'm like, ha ha ha, yeah, guess why? You know, people don't want to be like, hey, by the way, your kid's autistic. You know, people don't want to hear that. And nor should they hear it from me just because
exactly.
I happen to have an internet platform. Um, what I do privately in my own house and, you know, thinking about all of these celebrities that I have theories about, like, yeah, fine, who cares? It's my own house, I can say what I like. But um it is it's online, it's not really a problem. It's more in real life where I spot things and I'm like, oh yeah, got a little touch of the tism, you know.
I was just talking to somebody about this because I've made it very clear on my channel, I've made videos about it, like, unless you know a person, you can pull them aside, you can have a real conversation with them. You shouldn't be, like, pouncing on, like, "Oh, hey, just so you know, I know I just met you, but, you're probably autistic, bye." Like, that's a really bad way to handle things. But then my personal struggle is exactly what you're saying. When you meet someone, you spent a little time with them, I will off the cuff make a comment, like, I just not even thinking about it, like, "Oh, because of your ADHD. Oh, because of, like because you're on the autism spectrum," or something, and then I'm like, because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
figure
They already know.
they already know,
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, that's happened
but
to
it's
me a
not
couple of
that's not the
times.
case. So it's
Yeah.
really important to, like, unless somebody unless you're willing to have that conversation seriously or a person tells you, you should leave it. You should leave it.
Yeah, yeah. For the purposes of just preserving your relationships, I think, you know.
Well, also because I think there's like an idea that by saying that, we're saying that it's there could be the idea of like, oh well, what are you like? Is it a bad thing? Are you ashamed?
Mm,
No, but because of what people have these ideas of what being on the autism spectrum means,
yeah,
um, and the reaction can be very negative, and it can actually be very unhelpful to
yeah.
bring it up in those moments.
I think the thing that the furthest I get though is when I don't want to necessarily tell people this is what I think you have and this is why I think you have, because that's really obnoxious. But sometimes I'm having a conversation with people and I'm just trying to explain to them how most people don't like me and they don't know why they don't like me,
Mm,
you
mhm.
know? And so I'm like, just the fact that you're like my friend or you think I'm perfectly nice, you don't think I'm strange at all. Like, because I meet these people and they're like, I don't think you're odd or strange. And I'm like, exactly. And then they have to figure that bit out. But you know, like I try to convince people, like, yeah, most people I meet like just don't want to have a friendship with me, or like they just don't, right? Um, and and then you meet sort of undiagnosed autistic or ADHDers, and you're just like, yeah, why do you think you like me? I don't know.
I wish there was some sort of like
Maybe
easy
I'm too negative.
like DJ sound effect like that I could play when somebody you're talking to somebody and they're like, "Oh, well, you're saying that, but I'm like this and this and this and this, and I'm not on the autism spectrum." So, but I wish there was like a zinger sound or like like in
What would the sound like?
I'm trying to like think of the moment in my head where you're watching a sitcom and they like break the fourth wall and like the person like looks over at the screen and they're like, "Bing," or like I don't
Oh, that's the kind of noise you're going
yeah,
for.
where it's like, "Well, you put it together, not me. I can't."
Yeah, yeah. Wonder what would end up being the there's one which is like that whistle thing that goes whoop. That would be quite a good
Exactly,
one.
yeah.
That would be a good one.
Help me out. Um, but then there's something to say about everyone. It's hard because like, I want people to have access and to understand themselves, but then everyone also has their own journey. And there were times even in my life where, I was presented with autism as an option, and I wrote it off because I wasn't ready to, like, be hearing that.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on where the person is.
Because of
When
all the stigma, it's
mm,
just because it's still like I feel like ADHD is kind of cooler than autism, like stigma wise.
yes, yeah,
Saying you've got ADHD, you still get to be like a bit fun and quirky, right? A little bit
yeah,
fun and quirky. But when you tell people you're autistic, like people act like you've just been, I don't know, people act like it's a tragedy sometimes.
yeah.
You're like, I
Um,
can still be fun and quirky and autistic.
I think that
Check
that's
out my channel.
where, that I for me, I feel like that's where the reaction comes from when people say, "You don't look autistic." What they're trying to say they're trying to make it into, like, a positive for them. Sorry, I guess I have, 8,000,000 thoughts in my mind, and they all just went in different directions, so I'm just gonna have to reset there.
Sorry, I think I know what you're trying to say, but I'm not going to interrupt, and I'll just let you figure it out.
Ooh, thank you. Yeah, it's just that yeah, people, they wanna say something to make you feel, better, and it's not necessarily that they're trying to say, like, that, you know what? I'm just gonna stop there because I
They're trying, yeah, they're trying to make you feel better. They don't know what to say because you've just brought up something that doesn't quite like fit into their worldview because
exactly,
they don't
yes.
know what really autism is. And then all that they can match it with is what they've heard, like autism is like a bad thing. And they say, well, you look, you're smart, you're pretty, you know, like all this kind of stuff. And it's just really goes to show really how negatively autism has been portrayed.
Right, that's I
You
guess what
know?
I'm trying to say is that, when people hear autism, they think bad. When people
Yeah.
hear ADHD, they think, "Okay." Exactly. So it's like, uh, there's definitely a different, stigma when it comes to ADHD where it's like, uh, I feel like people look at ADHD, they think like, uh oh, that person sometimes they might be a lot, but, they're very creative and they've got different things going for them. But when people think about autism, they've got these ideas of like, oh, well, what's that person going to do with their life? And
Hmm.
I think it's because there's just not a clear picture. And we just have to continue. I mean, that's why I do what I do. And I'm sure, um, uh, I won't speak for you, but why you do what you do is like to educate people on what it actually is
Hmm.
so that there's more acceptance and understanding.
And what do you think? I'm going to start interviewing you now. What do you think about this, idea that like there's too many, I don't like the term, but like high functioning autistic people taking over the autism world and like speaking over the real autistic people? Like, what do you think about? Have you heard that criticism, or
I
like, what do you
have.
think about that?
Yeah, I don't talk about stuff like that much because it's controversial, isn't it? But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
have. I think about it a lot because I I I don't think it's a bad thing to say that not all autistic people are the same. And It it's kind of weird to me that anyone would think that someone who has less support needs would look at somebody with higher support needs, and say that we're the same, you
Yeah.
know? We're n I would never, I if anything, um, I wanna act I want to, uh, make sure that people who have higher support needs have all of the support that they need. And I know that most people I've encountered who are lower support needs will not take any support needs because they don't want to take away from people who have higher support needs. They'll
This is something
actually,
that really bothers me, actually,
yeah,
this idea that you're
lessen,
taking something away. Like, it's
yeah,
like there's a limited amount of support that we can give autistic people, and you people over here, you're taking it all away. It's like that's not really how it works. It's like, what
no,
is it,
yeah,
zero sum? It's not a zero sum game, it's like there's support for everyone. Actually, there's no support for anyone, but there should be support for everyone, right? Like,
yeah.
in an ideal world.
I mean, it's a good question, and it's a question I hear talked about a lot, this idea of, I think a lot of the language I don't know that I'm super comfortable with the language of, like, level 1, 2, 3, and level
Mm,
1 autistics taking the support and, kind of, uh, claiming autism for themselves and, taking away support.
it's just functioning labels with a different number on it to me.
Exactly, and
It seems
that's
like.
hard. I I always want to make clear that, yes, I can see the difference in support needs. And I can see that um, there are different that that people with have different support needs than me. But that doesn't mean that I don't have any support needs and I don't need any support. Um, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult because I hear all the time. Um, I'm hearing that a lot, and I don't always know how to handle it because I'm not trying to take away anything from anybody.
Mhm.
I want people to know that, um, autistic people, we're all different, and can we just be kind to one another? Like, I don't know, how do you feel about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think it's also there's like a misunderstanding of how much influence we have. So people
Yes.
see, oh, they see these numbers, right? They see these views and they're like, wow, people must be hanging on their every word, like waiting to hear what they'll say next, kind of thing. And that's really like not the case. Like I've thought about like, oh, I could do something around like non-speaking autistic people, or like having people on. Like typically interviews on my channel don't do very well. I'm now I've started my own podcast, which is kind of a separate thing. So like, yeah, maybe that will. But it's also like if I put a thumbnail and I put someone else's face on it, like next to my face, it will get less views than if I just
Mm,
put my face on
yeah.
it, right? And then that's frustrating because you're like, well, I want to try and do this, but actually, people are not watching my channel for that,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
And so, and if people don't watch that stuff, right, then it's like you're saying, hey, I want to be representative and I want to represent like all the different kinds of autistic people and increase diversity, but you can't do that as a one person channel, you know,
Right. It does put a lot of pressure back
onto autistic people like
onto
to
autistic
do
people.
this rather than like governments to provide actual support and care, right? It's like this isn't on us, I don't think.
And I don't
Solving
know
a
about you,
problem.
but I'm a one person show right now as far as like the YouTube, like putting everything together and editing, and it's a lot of pressure to put on. I mean, and I know a lot of other autistic creators as well. It's just one person running the whole thing. So,
Yeah. I mean,
um,
it's pretty much me. I have an assistant is really the wrong word, a team member who helps me out with like a small amount of stuff. You know, she does a few hours a week, but not this isn't like help with editing. This isn't like significant help. So aside from a little bit of the help that she gives me, like it really is just me doing everything. And then I'm like, okay, and I'm also working part-time hours because I have two kids. And I set up this business helping neurodivergent entrepreneurs also on the side, and now I'm going to be hopefully writing a book. This is still kind of a secret source thing, but there we go. And I'm just like, okay, and how am I supposed to actually do all of this? Because creating content is like, I don't want this to sound like I'm complaining because I really like it, but people have no idea how much work it takes just to make
yes,
one video. And like think,
right.
oh well, you can make a video every week. That's easy. You've got a whole week to make a video. And it's like, okay, researching the topic, if it's going to be a research heavy topic, researching the topic, that'll take a couple of hours at least, maybe even more if you want to do an in-depth thing. I write scripts, so I want to write a script for it, right? And then on the day of filming, like I want to do like my hair and makeup, so I have to actually put effort into looking presentable. Filming usually takes a couple of hours, maybe setting up the room, undoing it again. Editing probably takes me at least 6 hours on most things. And then like how many hours? So you're talking like 20 hours work at least. I say at least. No, I could probably do it in less. But it does take a lot of hours. And then, thinking about all the other stuff that you have to do. So like, building an email list or building your Instagram or replying to comments, like it's a lot, and it requires so many different skills that you have to get good at.
I'm always trying. The reason I make content and make maybe content that is not just about autism, not maybe it's a little more mundane sometimes, is because I want people to see all aspects of autistic life. It doesn't always have to be one way to be valid, I guess
Yeah.
is a good way to put it. Sometimes
That's
it's
great advice actually for me.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. I mean, especially I mean, I look at you, I look at somebody who, I mean, from my experience, most of us feel like, big old failures who, what's going on, right? Like, and I look at you and I think, oh, well, here's a person who I look up to, who has done a lot of work in the community, who's very successful. But that doesn't mean that that's how we feel about ourselves and how
Mm,
we're doing. And I always feel like there are fleeting moments where I'm like, yeah, I'm doing the thing. But most of the time, I don't feel like that at all.
yeah.
I feel like, okay, you can get out of bed. You can do this. Like that's the level I'm at most of the time. So,
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty much there with you. Like, I don't go around. It's going around thinking about how awesome I am is something that I've had to cultivate because I'm like, okay, life is too short to be constantly down on yourself all the time. So I'm like, oh,
Fair.
okay. I actively try and think like, okay, there is however many thousands of people online who actually pressed subscribe to you because they wanted to hear more from you, right? Like I have to have these little pep talks with myself as well. Because I go every time I upload a video, I'm like, what if it's shit? What if it's shit? What if everybody hates me? Like all of this stuff. And it's really hard to. I think it's the nature of the fact that you're doing it on your own in isolation, and
Mm,
then you're putting it out there onto the internet, and it's not real people coming around to like have a watch party with you. It's just like comments that kind of come and go digitally, and it's very detached from a grounded sense that you're making a difference, like a tangible sense that you're making a
mhm.
difference. So I had to tell myself, I'm like, remind myself of the comments and the emails that I do get from people who are like, thank you, I got my
Thanks.
diagnosis because
Yeah.
of you. Like, reminding myself of that, saying, like, even if I don't change the world in any other way, I've probably clogged up a few waiting lists, for autism assessments, but like, I've done something and I've improved some lives. And I still try and like just think of it like it's very easy to get carried away thinking like my views, this video didn't do as well as the last one, video is not doing as well as this channel's video on the same topic, like all of these. It's so easy to get caught up in that like complete neurotic mess. And maybe it's sort of a breath of fresh air for you to hear that I have the same worries. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's utterly depressing to know that no matter how far you go, you still have to like you're still holding on to that. I'd like to get rid of this baggage at some point in my life, but it's
No, I
hard to
I
know
don't think
how.
it's depressing. I think it's encouraging. I interact with, and I know you do as well, like a lot of people who are on the autism spectrum. And um, it's just interesting to experience that we all kind of feel the same way. We all deal with the same kind of insecurities.
Yeah,
Um, and these feelings of it's not enough, it's not good enough, it's kind of these feelings of being these feelings of maybe even failure. Like I struggle with that a lot, not living up to your own expectations. I struggle with that constantly. I just don't feel like the things that I do are good enough. Like I don't I like I'm constantly telling myself, okay, if you only have 50% to give, you gave your 50%, that's 100%. But still it's not good enough for me. I feel like 3 years into this journey of like launching my own endeavor, going into business, I don't know where I thought I would be, but I thought it would be further than this, and therefore failure. That's
yeah, yeah.
and that's
No,
not it.
I recognize that mindset, in myself as well. But I've actually one of the things that I have done, which kind of helps, is like looking back at your past self and like so
Mm,
looking at the achievements and milestones that you have got to, right? Because I one of the things I find is that like somehow like the more success, let's say, that I achieved, the more I'm like, okay, what's next, right? So
mm,
you get to 100K on YouTube, and like for so long that was like the ultimate thing that I could possibly, that would be like the coolest thing in the world, right? You get the silver plaque that's on my wall, and like that's the best thing in the world. And you get there and you're like, okay, cool, like you celebrate. But
mhm.
then it's not very long after until you're like, right, now I need to get the million one, and it's like this sort of never ending treadmill of like your achievements. So the thing that I do is I try and remember my mindset looking back when I was just growing my channel to the first 1,000 subscribers. I had a little sheet on my fridge and I colored in like every 10 or something. So it was like a little countdown and writing up. And so to me, remembering at that point, like, hey, what would she say to where you are now? Like,
Right.
what would 5 years ago Sam say if she could see you now? Like, she would be looking at you in a completely different light to the way that you look at yourself.
I feel like a super nobody, but then because I don't feel like my channel's not that big, it's a drop in the bucket. But then I also have people who I collab with or work with who are where I was, where they're like, they're at 1,000 or 5,000, and I have to remind myself, like, that's a big following. Like,
Well, imagine all those people in a room together.
no, I don't want to.
Exactly.
I don't wanna
Like
be in
that's the
that room.
thing. That's one of the things that like I sometimes tell my clients. I'm like, okay, you think when you do your first videos you get 10 views and you're like, oh, that's such a low number. But like imagine talking to 10 people in a room who really want to hear what you have to say. The internet does such strange things with our concept of like what is successful, what is a big view, what is a large amount of followers, what is a large amount of views, and this sort of thing. And like at the end of the day, I say this as somebody who likes numbers. Like it's very unhealthy to get fixated on numbers, and it doesn't sustain you in the long run.
Yeah, I think that the conversation for me, I don't know how you feel, it has shifted to what is success?
Yeah,
What
exactly.
does, what does that look like for me as a late diagnosed autistic person? After diagnosis, everything shifts, and it does take, I mean, I think it's gonna be a lifelong journey to figure out, like, who I am, what I like, etcetera, but your ideas need to shift of, like, what does success mean? What will make you happy? Like, what if I were to be at the end of my life tomorrow, like, what would I want that to look like looking back? Like,
Yeah,
would
yeah,
it be how many subscribers that I had, or would it be measured in other ways? And I'm learning that it has to be measured in other ways for me
yeah.
because I've said before, like, I'm from, like, the old s I remember when YouTube was born, and I thought, "Oh, I'm gonna get this started, and, like, in a few years, I'll have 1,000,000 subscribers and whatever. It's gonna be great." Um, and that's just not what the reality has been. Friends that I've met on YouTube who've come up the same time as me, they have become much larger channels than mine. Watching all of that and, like, learning what is I ask myself a lot, "What is the lesson in that?" Like, what is the lesson in that? What am I learning? And does that reflect on me? Like, I have these, big, grand, philosophical conversations with myself.
Mhm.
Um, what does it mean that their channels have grown and mine haven't? And what what do they say that's different? And are they more likable than me? And what like all of these things. I think where I've gotten to is um I just it's okay to that the journey's at my own pace, and thinking about, is it okay if this is as big as my channel gets, if this is as big as my business gets, like, what does that mean? And am I okay with that?
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe other people, I don't know if other people have thoughts like that, but I do. So, like,
I
being
think with
okay with that.
like the idea of kind of success, you get to obviously, you get to define success. I think for a long time I was using success in whatever form as something to chase after because
Yeah,
I felt that when I was successful, I would feel a certain way.
better or whatever,
Like you'd feel better about yourself, like because you'd be so awesome. So, like, 5 years ago, Sam be like, when I have 100,000 subscribers, like I will be so awesome and cool and stuff like that. And then you get there and you're like, but I just still feel like I don't know what I'm doing, and you know, blah blah blah. And so for me, it was like hitting a few of the sort of milestones of success and being like, oh, I don't feel any different now. Like,
right.
so what am I chasing? I'm chasing a feeling that doesn't come. And then what I did was I was like, okay, so imagine yourself like you hit 1 million subscribers. How do you think you're actually going to feel about that? And I was like, probably just like, I don't know what to do. I'll probably celebrate with a live stream or something. And so it's like takes that shine off these like big lofty goals that you have, but that's good in a way because that's not really what you should be striving for. It's like the
Right.
numbers or these goals. So for me it was like this, I definitely realized that I was chasing a feeling where I finally felt like I respected myself. I'm like, well,
Mm.
can I not just do that? Can
Yeah.
I not just start doing that now and like start feeling a little bit more awesome and like, and so for me that feels like arrogance. But if you have been constantly putting yourself down, any kind of a self, like even just naming the good things you do about it's going to feel like arrogance for a bit. And to be
Mm.
honest, I'd rather be a little bit arrogant and happy than put myself down the whole time. So if anyone thinks I'm arrogant, I don't care.
Maybe it's, with the late diagnosis thing, it almost feels like a clock starts after you get the diagnosis. I'm just having a thought experiment here. So if it doesn't work out, that's cool too. Um, where you're like, oh, okay, now that I have the diagnosis, my life can get started. And
Mm,
you're kind of trying to make up for lost time. Because when I was undiagnosed and constantly masking and constantly trying to figure out who I was, why wasn't it working? Why is it, why do I keep failing at things? Why do I keep having these reactions to things? Now that after the diagnosis, I kind of got this sense of, okay, well, that obstacle has been taken out of the way. Like I know now that I am on the autism spectrum. I could work with this. Now I can finally be, I could finally figure things out, get to the level of success that I want. But the what really happens is that there is no timeline. As you were saying, like it's just because you're getting to like certain numbers or goals, like you still have to be comfortable with yourself throughout the whole process. I loved what you said about, like why not now? Like why can't I think good things about myself now? Like why does it have to only be tied to
yeah.
certain things? Maybe I'll never have 100,000 subscribers. Should I just quit? Like, I don't think so. Um, because I feel so great about what I'm doing and like the fact that anybody would reach out to me and say like, "Hey, you're really helping me." Like, should I that could be an indicator of success that I had not really thought about before.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that like obviously, well, society, like especially, growing up, keeps talking about myself like I'm the oldest person on the internet sometimes. But like growing up, back when I grew up, back in the day,
Back when the
um,
internet was young.
back when the internet was young and we were on forums and it was all kind of a nicer place. I forgot what I was going to say. This always happens. Make a joke and then I lose my train of thought. Oh yeah, this idea of success. I don't know whether this was like that for you growing up. I grew up in the UK. Obviously, you're different kind of cultural things, but I felt like success was very much like these really big things. Like you're a success if you're a famous published author or something like that,
Right. Yes.
right? It's not enough. And so then I self-published a book and I was like, it's just self-publishing. And I'm like, no, I am an author, right? And so I had to like retrain myself to not be a snob about my own achievements, you
Yeah.
know? But
Yeah.
maybe that was just I don't know whether this is like something that, everyone else was raised with these just almost like impossibly high standards or impossibly high expectations. And that was definitely like probably a result of the school that I went to. It was a very kind of um I don't want to say elite. They probably would use the word elite, but it's this institution where everyone was very high performing, and so the expectation was just like that's how you achieve success is that you are the best in the country at something, you know, and anything less than that is just mediocrity, you know.
I just feel like these are great topics to talk about because I know that so many um, other diagnosed people that I've talked to fall into this category of it never feels like enough. And
Yeah.
maybe a really great goal is to help other people feel like it's enough. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be like, honestly, like, I'm thinking to myself, like, if I'm not in it's not success unless, like, you're you're teaching people about me in 30 years in a history book. Like, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
not a normal standard to have.
No, 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 it's not. But it's also like, I think for people who are kind of listening and they're like, they relate to that feeling of like nothing is ever enough. I think maybe it's reassuring to know that like even when you get to the point, to that pinnacle, I say this as though I've like reached that point, but you know, like it's never going to be enough. It's never going to feel like it's enough. Like that feeling does not come from the accomplishments. It comes from a whole other place inside that you're cultivating, you know?
Yeah, it's weird to think about because, um, I think especially as an undiagnosed person, like, trying so hard to get to, I remember trying really hard to get to, like, these, pictures of success in my mind, and then
Mm,
getting to those levels, and at the end of it, it just being burnout, it just being not what I expected, not being able to continuously hold up this mask, it not working out in the way that I thought it would. So then to like turn around into this new life where I have more information about myself, um, and I keep discovering new things about myself. I just need to be. I don't know. I feel like I'm kind to everyone but myself. Like if I was talking to you, I'd be like, give yourself grace.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
doing amazing. But then when it comes to me, I'm like, am I'm a big loser who doesn't get much accomplished. So
yeah, yeah. No, definitely recognize that feeling of like I would never treat anyone the way I treat myself.
it's hard to, I think, as an adult with autism, because it's not just about how I'm feeling as far as success. It's also um, how how will I take care of myself and my family? Like if I'm not earning, then I don't want to tie my success to like a monetary value or earning things. But
Yeah,
then also adults have bills and adults
yeah,
so it becomes like okay, well, okay, I feel successful in that I'm helping people, but then also got to pay my
hmm,
bills. So that it just throws there's so many complicated things. And I'm just saying this so other people know that you're not alone. If you're listening out there and you feel this way, you are not alone.
definitely not alone. In fact, you're in great company.
Great, the best
Yeah.
company, basically. You said that you've self-published a book. What was your book about?
Hold on. I keep it here, easy access for these opportunities. It's called So You Think You're Autistic? Oh, I'm just trying to remember. A workbook for the confused person who's just trying to figure things out.
I love that.
So it's really, I guess I got a lot of I get a lot of audience from people who are in this limbo phase, you know, of like, don't know whether to get a diagnosis, kind of found your content and I relate to it, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And I'm just a confused person trying to figure things out, something like that. And so what I wanted to create was like a guide that would help people figure these things through because I know from firsthand experience that once you open that box, you're like, oh, there's all these memories and things. Is this relevant? Is that relevant? Back when I was 5, I did this. Was that autism? You know, all of these kind
Mm,
of things, and it's really hard to know how to first of all get it all straight in your head, but then also talk about it with other people.
yes.
Especially going to the doctor and be like, I think I've got autism, and they go, well, why? And you go, so this was really intended as a way that people could organize their thoughts if they did want to then take that to a professional to help outline, it would then be something that would be helpful for the professional as well. And that's one of the, actually, one level of marker of success is one of the things that I've gained is when professionals contact me and say that, I had a client who I diagnosed and they'd brought this book in and it was really, really helpful for
I love it.
me as a professional, that I didn't need to, like, I guess they didn't need to ask any questions because I did it for them. But like, so that the person came to the assessment already prepared and like knowing the different areas that they'll be talking about and having had a chance to think about that beforehand. Because somebody in your assessment, they ask you like, what were your friendships like as a child? And like, that's a very difficult question to answer on the spot. Like, all of this stuff is actually difficult to answer on the spot.
It
And
is when
so
it's your
yeah.
it's hard to answer those questions when it's your experience and you don't know any different. So when
Mm,
somebody would ask, "What are your friendships like?" I remember that those questions in particular because I really had never thought of it in context to autism. Like, I just thought that I knew that my friendships were different than other people's. I
mm.
knew that. I knew it was different, but I didn't know why. So, I think what a great resource that you've provided for people where I don't know where to go from here. Here's kind of a stopgap. So, it's
Yeah. And it was kind of it was inspired by a conversation I had with an acquaintance that it was in a book club, and she kind of came to me going like, I think I have autistic traits and I'm not sure. And we had this whole conversation, and by the end of the conversation I was just like, this is the vibe that I want for the book. Like, I want it to feel like somebody's talking to a friend, like talking things through, rather than something that's very sort of cold and clinical, which is why it is so colorful.
I love it.
It, like, if I could have had the option, it would have been shiny and sparkly as well, but there's only limited. And it's also like full color on the inside,
Oh,
so I wanted
cool.
to make it fun, not like a worksheet of disorders that you think that you might have or something like that. I want it to be like, yeah, I'm a 13-year-old filling in my diary about how cool I am. That was the vibe. That was the creative brief that I gave myself. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how it turned out. And like, talk about success. That's like one of the measures of success, is that like I did it, and I'm really proud of what I managed to do on my own.
Yeah, I'm proud of you. That's a lot of work.
Thank you.
I mean,
Yeah.
especially, seeing how, you have, like, full color pages and, it's not just about writing the material, but also, like, formatting and making it look good. That's a long process and a long journey, so I can't even
Yeah.
imagine the hours and hours and hours of work that went into designing each page and making sure that it looked exactly the way that you wanted it to. I mean, what you're saying is, like, you're inviting someone to, reflect on the pages, so
Exactly. Yeah.
it has to be special.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny though, because I had some people um, give me some feedback that it was too pretty, so they didn't want to write on it. So they wrote in another notebook so they didn't ruin it. And I was like, you should put that on your assessment as well. This is like not what's it called? Anthropomorphizing a notebook. Like, it's too precious to ruin, or something like that.
Right, you've got the
I
book, you're
just
like,
thought
"Well,
that was
here's the book, and here's my
yeah,
notebook that goes with it." And
yeah,
it's interesting that you, that's the idea that you came up with because I did not personally bring a binder with me to my assessment. However, I've seen and heard that many people do put binders together.
I had a
Um,
7-page Google Doc, and I think that when they see these elaborate documents, they would just like check, right, and then they just zone
exactly.
out for the next 3 hours. They're like, yeah, we see this one coming, don't we?
Yeah, when people tell me that they bring that to the assessment, I'm like, "And there was a question in your mind?" So
Right? Like, I think that's the thing that like we're so separated from what, like, I don't want to say normal. I don't want to use the word normal, but like a typical life experience is that sometimes we can't see that these funny little things we do, like make a binder or something, like that's considered weird. Because like, to us, to the way my brain works, totally normal. Okay, I've got a lot of things, information, so I'm going to put it in a document and make categories. Like, that is the way that my brain processes
yeah.
information. Also because I low-key don't trust the doctor to do the right thing, so I'm going to make sure that like it's comprehensive and there can't be any mistakes. But like then you look back at that and you're like, that is very autistic behavior, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And well, sometimes it makes me feel a bit fuzzy inside because I'm like, oh, I really am autistic. I'm not just faking it still after all these years. um but yeah, we're so far removed from like the typical experience that we don't see ourselves clearly sometimes,
Oh man,
you
I
know.
love a
And that's where the
binder
imposter
too.
syndrome comes from,
Yeah.
because like there's a part of us that still thinks we're normal. And do you know what, sometimes I get emails. I got an email the other week, this is really funny actually. One of my videos about masking, I'd made a comment like I felt like I masked really well, right, which I didn't think was a controversial topic. And this person, among other things, just said to me, I found that pretty funny because you look so autistic to me. And I was just like, I know that's not an insult, but it felt like an insult. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm do I not mask superbly? And then I'm like, of course I don't mask superbly, because
And
if
am
I
I
was
not
so good at
easily enough?
masking, but if I was so good at masking, like would I've had all these problems with friendships and stuff like that over the years? Like I wouldn't have, because I would have masked it all. So like I'm clearly not that great at masking, but it was just funny. And then you get these people who are just like, well, I actually think you're pretty autistic, which is also what my diagnostician said. She goes, well, this was an easy diagnosis to make. And I'm like, really? I thought I hid it.
I
I thought I
know.
masked.
So I would love to hear from you. What do you have coming up in the world of Sam? Anything interesting? You mentioned that you're doing some writing. Do you have any videos coming up? Like what's up in the world of Sam?
Okay, so I'm like, this is me trying to visualize my project board. First of all, I would not recommend that people take on as many projects as I do, because it is not really good for your mental health. But here we are. It's too late to back out of any of this now. So yeah, like I have some videos coming up. One of the things I've been working on over the last year has been to work with neurodivergent business owners to help them grow their businesses in a sustainable and neuro-friendly way, right? And that's
Mhm.
been really, really awesome. I love doing that client work because it's so much more like it makes me feel like I'm really working with people rather than just putting stuff online and hoping that they like it or something like that. So that's one thing. I'm doing a retreat. I'm holding an in-person retreat in the
Whoa.
Amsterdam area. It's kind of aimed at that target, that client group, but also like for professionals, people who are having to balance like a working life with their neurodivergence. So it's going to be like glamping.
I
The
wish I could
food's
come.
all provided. There's going to be like workshops on burnout and all of these kind of stuff. So I'm doing that in July. I'm trying to think like, oh yeah, I can give you a link so that people can register for that
Absolutely.
if
Yeah.
they're interested. It's 1 hour from Amsterdam. It's going to be awesome. There's going to be like maximum 24 people, including me. So it's going to be very intimate and like a great chance to be out in nature. And I'm really excited about that. Also, kind of terrified, but it's something new, right? So that's that thing. I'm very close to being able, well, I'm in the process of a book proposal with a publisher. It's going very well, but I have nothing official to announce on that. But it will be a book. It will be like a proper published book, right? It will be a book. Yes, I will have to remember how to write and construct sentences. But
Words will
I'm very
happen, pages will be
words
printed.
eventually. Yeah, they will happen. But that's obviously kind of a longer term project, so I wouldn't expect that to be out until um, maybe even the end of next year. That might be something, according to the timelines, but, we'll wait and see. What else do I do? What else do I do? No, that's
It's
it.
so funny when people ask and it's all of a sudden you're like, "Well, I'm pretty busy, so it must be a lot." And then you list
Yeah.
it off and you're like, "It doesn't seem like that much, but that's a lot." What you just said is a lot.
Yeah, and I had to have words with myself, because at some point in the last few months I was like, I could write two books at the same time. Right? No, I can't. No, like this is the thing. I just don't have any concept of like when to stop, because I'm like, I could do this. This would be fun. This is the ADHD. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
sure, I can do all of these things at once. I'm like, actually, no, I just need to dial it back in. Like, I need to keep my ADHD on a pretty tight leash. Otherwise, things, get messy pretty quickly. So yeah, that's the projects that I'm working on. This is why when people are like, your channel's dead because you only posted one video a month, and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of busy because I'm putting all this into part-time hours. I also have two children and a house to take
I
care
get
of.
it.
Like, there is a life, and I sometimes do even see friends and stuff like that. So
I have
it's,
to remember that if people aren't seeing like content or something, like if people don't see me, then it doesn't exist. Like I have to remember that because sometimes I'm like, well, I'm very busy behind the scenes. And people are
yeah,
like, well, if you're not putting out content, if we don't
yeah.
know that, then it doesn't really actually matter to the audience. So, as a closing, I always ask all of my guests, what would your message be to the autism community at large? Just a short few words. And what would you say to somebody who's watching and might need to hear something?
I would say that, okay, don't underestimate the growth that you're capable of.
Good one.
That's what I'd like to say, because the reason that's what came into my mind is because I've been there as well. I often feel like a lot of us think that we can't, like things are a bit hopeless, like we're never going to get better, we're never going to not be depressed, like it's always just going to be like this. It's kind of this, I guess, black and white thinking, this sort of mentality. But and I'm not talking about like improving your skills or growth on that. I'm saying growth, like personal growth is possible. And once you start to engage with content like the woodshed theory, you know, you go on your own personal journey, and that can take you some really beautiful and amazing places.
Mm.
And, you know, sticking around with us cool content creators, that was like the most middle-aged thing I think I've ever said. Sticking around with us and like learning about yourself and understanding your traits can really lead to a very enriched life.
Wonderful. I want to thank you
Yeah.
for taking the time to share with us today. I had an amazing conversation and I really enjoyed our time together. And I know that it's a little late for you. So thank you for scheduling, working with me on the schedule. And
Yeah, no worries. I'm
thank,
about to dive into bed. I'm already in my pajamas. I'm like wearing a t-shirt that is merch, but is also my pajamas. So like I'm
yeah,
ready to
I
go.
live in my pajamas anyway. I did put, I saw my pajama pants on, so nobody's going to see them. So
It's like the newsreaders things. It's the yoga pants, the pajama pants. That's what
exactly.
YouTuber costume.
I
Yeah.
did put on a clean shirt, so you're welcome. And uh, well, thank you for being on the show. And I thank you on behalf of a lot of people who requested your presence. I
Well,
hope,
thank you everyone for requesting me. I'm very honored.
yeah, I hope that everyone has a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Okay, everyone? Bye.
Are we gonna do a little singing outro, or did we not do that?
Goodbye. So long. Farewell. I don't have one, but
That
all
was
right.
great. That was great.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.